What's going on, Omnibuddies? Mitch here, and today we are looking at my top 5 horror comics or spooky comics. It is the month of Spooktober, but you know what? Some people like reading horror comics all year round. No shame on them. So if you are looking for some good horror comics, let's dig in. Okay, so first things first, I am not a major horror reader. In fact, some of the crazy ones that I know are probably much scarier or spookier or more grotesque and things like that. Not really for me. So these books aren't really gonna be in that vein. They're going to be more, probably more supernatural, some horror elements, spooky, all that kind of stuff. But they're really, for the most part, not going to be in that vein. And I'm gonna do my top 5, but I have 2 other ones that, of course, I need to throw in because you gotta have some honorable mentions in there. So you know what? We're gonna start off with number 7 out of 5. Something like that. For my first honorable mention, we are looking at Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is the adaptation by George Bess, and man, this book is awesome. Not only is it just gorgeous as like a production value hardcover from Magnetic Press, but dang, is this book really good. If you love Dracula, this has got to be one of the best adaptations directly from Bram Stoker's story, where Bess went back to. He even has some of the original kind of chapter at the beginning that is often not included in a lot of these things. But you know, it's not a super long book, so Bess does take some liberties, chop out some things that he personally doesn't find to be important or anything like that. But overall, this story is absolutely phenomenal. The art is brilliant. It is all black and white, but you know what? It doesn't matter. This has beautiful art, from the thick black lines to the like plain white page that uses like negative space. And just, man, the detail that Bess gets into this art is phenomenal, and his storytelling, beautiful too. So not only do you get great art, you get amazing story and one of the most iconic monsters out there with Dracula in one of the original forms. So if you're interested in seeing more of a direct adaptation, this is a great way to go. Obviously, like I said before, it's not perfectly direct, but it is really good. Okay, so my second honorable mention, and I just read this story for the first time as of making this video about a week, 2 weeks ago, and it absolutely blew me away. I have been wanting to read this story for so long. It is H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. This is the deluxe manga edition by Gao Tanab, and it is a beautiful book. Again, this also has that amazing silver gilding. And man, this is a phenomenal story. It's the manga style, so you read right to left in it. And again, it's mostly all black and white. There are some pages in there that are color, but for the most part, you are also getting another black and white, which I think fits horror, suspense, thriller books really well, is having these black and white books. I don't know, I just feel like it fits the genre really well. The art is just so good. And the story is just I want to say out of this world, but that is a bit of a leaning too much on a pun. But you know what? For me, that's not a bad thing. But man, this is also an adaptation by Gao Tanab, and he takes a little bit of liberties, but for the most part, really good adaptation. You can plow through this book pretty quickly too, in a couple sittings over a day or two. Awesome story. Some really cool horror and suspense elements in there. And it's a great introduction to the Lovecraft genre. Okay, so those are my honorable mentions. Now we are going to start with number 5. We are getting into, this is a double book series, 2-volume series, I guess, published by Image. It's one of my favorite creators, Jeff Lemire. We got Andrea Sorrentino and Stewart on colors. We have Gideon Falls right here, volumes 1 and 2. I suppose I should hold them in that order, but man, are these books awesome. Really cool, like just horror elements in there, and these are color, but there is a lot of kind of muted tones in there too. And man, does Sorrentino play with the panels in this, just using all kinds of crazy panel structures, sometimes just like no structure whatsoever. Really fun, really interesting, following a guy who doesn't know if he is kind of going insane or if these things that are happening to him are real, and it's following his doctor and him talking about it. And then time starts to bend, the world starts to bend, things get crazier and crazier, and man, does it get absolutely nuts by the end. Definitely a book, series of books that you need to reread a couple times to really grasp the fullness of it. So I actually really want to reread it again. But man, Gideon Falls, really fun, really cool story, all self-contained, and wow, really fun. And really creepy at times. I gotta say, like a lot creepier than like Mountains of Madness, and in my opinion, a lot creepier than Dracula was by Bess, but dang was it good. Okay, so now we are going to jump into, what would we just do, 5? So now we are on number 4. We are looking at Harold Schechter's and Eric Powell's Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done? This book, like, this is the one book I was really thinking about. I'm just double checking. Yeah, this is the one book that is really, truly like body horror and just horrific and gross to look at. Creepy and dark. And what's even worse is it's based on a true story, and most of it is really actually true. I mean, obviously they had to add a little bit to it here and there to make the story, you know, fully fleshed out. Another terrible pun, but that one really works with Eddie Gein Done, because this is a crazy story about a serial killer, cannibal, really messed up dude with a really messed up family. What's really weird is this guy's like absolutely horrendous, but kind of by the end of the book, you're kind of feeling bad for the dude, which is weird it is a weird position as a reader to be put in when you're reading about someone doing such horrific things. Also, my dad used to deliver ice as a kid to Eddie Gein, which, if you know anything about the story, what he's probably using refrigeration ice for, growing up in central Wisconsin. So a little bit of a too close to home, literally for me. But man, was this book absolutely crazy to read. Could not put it down. This might actually be one of the first comics I give to my dad to read. I don't think he's ever read a comic before besides, you know, like the Sunday Funnies and like Calvin and Hobbes and things like that. But man, this might be one he would be interested in reading because of his connection with that whole story too. Okay, we are now on number 3. And this is a massive series. It is an entire universe, but you don't have to read the entire thing. There are orders to it, and you can look those up online, but you can read just sections of it and be totally fine. If you read everything, you'll get way more out of it, but you won't, you'll still love it even just reading it in sections. And I gotta say, you can read it in one section, which is the Hellboy series. You can get the library editions or like the monster size Hellboy, which includes a bunch of this stuff in here, and just read that and be totally fine and not have to go into all the like crazy amounts of BPRD stuff. I'm pointing over there because that's where I have all my BPRD stuff down there. BPRD, Witchfinder, Baltimore, Lobster Johnson. I mean, there's Frankenstein, there's Joe Gollum. There's a ton of stuff in the Mignolaverse. But man, this is one of the most comprehensive, cohesive, well-written, well-told, well-illustrated stories and universes in comics. Well, even really in written where, man, this story is absolutely phenomenal, and you can get all 7 library editions and just read mostly the just Hellboy editions, the Hellboy library editions, and get a ton out of it. That's how I started. I read all 7 library editions. I was like, okay, I need to track down the BPRD books and all that. And now I have, I think, everything. I'm missing a couple small hardcovers, but for the most part, I have everything. And I'm still working my way through some of it because I am taking my time and savoring every page of it because it is so good. The art is just so consistent, which is crazy because they have so many different artists drawing on it. They have different writers telling the stories, but they're all so consistent. They just stay in that Mignolaverse feel. Wow, it is so good. If you've seen the movies and like them, you'll probably love these. If you watch The Crooked Man, and I know a lot of people did not like The Crooked Man, which blows me away because that horror kind of, that movie was like more true horror, and that was very, very true to the Hellboy Mignolaverse books. In fact, it sticks really closely to the actual Crooked Man story in the Hellboy books. So if you've seen that movie and dug it, check out Hellboy. It is a great read. Hopefully you get hooked and you are committed to it because, oh man, it is so good. So good. Okay, so number 2 is actually one of my top books of all time, but I put it at number 2 just because one other book, the one in front of it, is really sticking with me, and I really, really love it. And it just took me by total surprise how much I loved it. Anyways, so number 2 is Rachel Rising by Terry Moore. This Omni is fantastic. Again, it's all black and white, sticking in the vein of, man, I think nearly all these books are black and white. Did you hear Eddie Gein done was black and white? It's basically Gideon Falls and Hellboy are the only 2 color books in this list. But man, Rachel Rising was like one of my first books that I jumped into that wasn't really one of the big 2. And what I mean by big 2 is like Marvel and DC, those 2 giant publishers. This showed me what independent books could really be and really do, and what smaller publishers could really bring to the table. And wow, I absolutely loved and love Rachel Rising. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And what's cool is you can just read this book by itself. It's totally fine, totally self-contained and all that. But what's cool is Terry Moore has all these other books: Echo, Rachel Rising, SIP, Strangers in Paradise, SIP. I'm looking over there. Yeah, so just a ton of different books that he has done like individuals from, and some of the characters would like show up in his books and you're like, oh, that's kind of a cool homage, or they might have a line, you know, like, oh, a cool little like guest part in the book or something like that. But he did something really cool with some other books like Strangers in Paradise 6 years later, or I think it's 20 years later, something like that. Like the second part of that story that he came back to, and Ever, and all these other books. And he's brought together the whole Terry Moore-verse and turned it into this whole like crossover universe where they all take place in the same universe. Super cool. But this book is a really great horror genre book with some really cool poltergeist, like demon stuff going on. Really cool, very witchcrafty stuff. So if you're digging that kind of thing and you love stories about that where they kind of get sucked into that world unbeknownst to them and unwillingly, and then they just have to deal with the consequences. Very cool story, very cool book. Okay, so now we are getting to my top horror comic of all time, my top recommendation. We are going back to George Best with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, with the adaptation by George Best. This book and the Dracula book actually came in a slipcase. Here, I got my slipcase right here, which I'm very proud of. I do some side work with Magnetic Press, who publish these books, and I got to actually help with the design and some of these books, and we actually won an Eisner Award for production design, book design on these, mainly for the slipcase, the limited edition slipcase. But man, friggin' love these books. You can get the hardcovers. They don't actually have, like, the regular non-Kickstarter hardcovers don't have the gilding and the bookmark on them, I believe is what it is. But otherwise, they're the exact same books. But man, Frankenstein, wow, did that book absolutely blow me away, because it wasn't just like your typical horror book, where it's just kind of like wants to like gross you out or scare you or tell a cool story, which it does all those things. But what it does is explores life and what it means to be alive, and what it means to create, and the responsibility of creating things and destroying things, and what our responsibility towards that as humans, as creators, inventors, and as humans as destroyers too. And man, this book just dives so deep into it, into just as Frankenstein's monster becomes more and more self-aware and becomes more learned, and begins reading and studying people and what it means to be human, and what it means to love and hate and create and destroy, and his thoughts on it as someone trapped in the middle of all of this. It is such a beautiful story and so well told. I mean, gotta hand it to Mary Shelley, who wrote the original story. Beautiful, beautiful story. Bess, who adapted it to this format. Wow. Like, again, his art is just, it's S tier. It is up there. It is some of the best comic art, in my opinion, that you will find. Like, the details that he slips into these pages, but then he just has these like giant strokes of just all black, and then you just have like tiny bits of like negative space white in there, or the inverse where it's like nearly all white with just a little black character, just like the shadow of them in the like center of the page or in the corner. Like, beautifully done. And how he chose to like illustrate it, and the emotions and the faces. I mean, the monster is just grotesque looking, hard to look at, but wow, it's that whole, it's not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. You know, who really is the monster? Are we the monsters? Is Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, is he the monster? Is the monster truly the monster? But wow, such a good story. It has stuck with me for so long. I read it about a year ago, and I still find myself thinking about it all the time. It is one of my top stories I've read so far as a comic reader, and I will always sing the praises of this book. So good. But yeah, all right, so we have Dracula, we have At the Mountains of Madness as our top two, or as our honorable mentions, and then we have Gideon Falls by Lemire and Sorrentino. We have Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done, Mike Mignola's Hellboy, Mignolaverse, all of that stuff. We got Rachel Rising, and then Frankenstein. So, as I said, I'm not a major horror reader. I love the storytelling and using those devices, and using horror as a storytelling device. And I really love when they explore humanity through those devices and through the tones of horror or thriller or whatever, you want to look at. But man, so those are them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification, do all those things. But the most important thing to do is, as I always say, comment. Let me know in the comments what your top horror story is and why. Hopefully it's still available, because if there are some really good horror recommendations in here, I'm personally not just looking for like body horror and like jump scares or anything like that, but I'm looking for stuff that horror stuff that reflects humanity and makes you think about it and why this horror exists. So I love that kind of a thing. Let me know in the comments. Love talking with you. All right, that's it. Take care. Stay cool.